Greetings, dear ones, and on behalf of collaborators across the U.S., I welcome you to this Holy Good Friday worship. My name is Reverend Linda Stephan, she, her, and I am a pastor in Michigan. As we get started, we recognize that today is a difficult day, one where we face torture and injustice. All we can tell you is that you don't have to go this alone today. And we want to introduce ourselves before we get started, starting with Reverend Vivian. Reverend Vivian, can you unmute?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Reverend Vivian Brown-Toussaint, and I'm the pastor of St. Mark United Methodist Church in Pascagoula, Mississippi, and St. Stephen United Methodist Church in Goshen. I'm blessed that we are all going to be a part of this on this night.
Thank you. Reverend Cassandra?
Oh, hello, everybody. So glad to be with you this evening. I am located in Marietta, Georgia, in my kitchen, thanks to the pandemic. Glad to be here with you on this sacred occasion.
Reverend Darci? Maybe we can come back to Reverend Darci in a moment. Reverend Kyle?
Hello, I am Reverend Kyle Stevenson. I am a member of the Alpha Street Baptist Church in Alexandria, Virginia. I currently live in D.C., but I'm also affiliated with the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta. It's good to be with you all tonight.
Reverend Jordan?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Reverend Jordan Stewart. I bring you greetings from Washington, D.C., where I currently serve as a spiritual artist in residence with Howard University. Good to be here. Thank you all.
Minister Jonathan?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Minister Jonathan Oliver. I serve at Centennial Baptist Church in Portsmouth, Virginia, and New City Ministries in Chesapeake, Virginia, and I'm honored to worship with everyone tonight.
Pauline?
Hello, my name is Pauline Williamson. My pronouns are they and them, and I'm coming to you from Odessa, Texas, at the Pride Center, West Texas, where we work with the LGBTQN plus communities and those who support them. And we are very happy to be with you this evening.
And we also have, as part of our collaboration, Cameron Johnson and Reverend Darci Jaret, who will join us as soon as they are able, but right now they're very busy working on backstage operations. I invite you as well, as we come together in places far and wide, to pass the peace of Christ, to let us know that you are here and to share a word of encouragement and hope to those who are present with you. Let us worship.
A Small Needful Fact by Ross Gay. Is that Eric Gardner worked for some time for Parks and Rec Horticultural Department, which means perhaps that with his very large hands, perhaps, in all likelihood, he put gently into the earth some plants which most likely, some of them in all likelihood, continue to grow, continue to do what such plants do, like house and feed small and necessary creatures, like being pleasant to touch and smell, like converting sunlight into food, like making it easier for us to breathe. Amen.
Hello, my name is Darci Jaret. I am so happy to have collaborated with Jordan on this call to worship. So we asked Reverend Jordan to come back on camera and lead us in this call to worship. You will see the responses at the bottom of the screen. As Jordan pulls up the document, I want to say thank you to those who stepped in. Thank you to Reverend Cassandra, who is running things behind the scenes. And I appreciate this collaboration so much. Sorry that we had technical difficulties to begin. As Jordan opens up the document and we think about this moment where we are called together, I appreciate that this was written in collaboration with you, Jordan.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience, everyone. Let us worship together. Merciful God, you who have called your children to be like the grain of wheat that dies in order to transform. Lord, have mercy. Mysterious God, you understand the end and the beginning of life. Help us awaken to the manifold lessons of the cross, ones not comprehended through triumph and glory, but understood only in deep heartache and grief. Compel us, God, to reimagine your sacrifice. Righteous God, you have wielded a heavy burden. You have wielded a heavy burden upon your marginalized and beloved creations to redeem the whole world of injustice. Infinite Creator, make a way. God, you plant these trees by flowing rivers, and you say that we shall not be moved. But God, the trees are displaced, the branches are broken, there is blood at the root. The world is ripping us apart. With all humility, we say that it is God who should ask for forgiveness. Amen.
And now let us pray. Holy One, you bore this weight as well, did you not? A human carving, a cross upon the blades of your back. You bent low, making your way to the place of the skull. How you bore a shame that wasn't yours to bear. I imagine somehow poplar or heavy oak, but probably it was cedar or even olive wood. Isn't that wood designed to produce fruit? How the limbs of the tree must hang low. I sense it somehow after that shot. You know the one that makes limbs so heavy they can hardly withstand their own weight for a time. Is this the weight that is borne by the trees? By our people scorned and rejected, by our Savior, the Christ. The pain, the trauma, the shame, the culpability, too often ours to bear with the unending violence this world inflicts. The trauma is everywhere, even in the trees. Limbs held heavy by the weight of ropes, carved to torture. Trees were designed not for torture, not for starvation, not to be bent over with the weight of shame, but to lift high in praise of the name, to stretch holy limbs to the sky in search of the sun. But we have robbed the trees. Strange fruit. We harm and we hurt. Strange fruit. Holy One, forgive us. challenge us, change us, repair us, remember us. Amen.
Calvary, 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 Calvary. Surely he died on Calvary. A certain tree bears strange fruit, blood on the leaves, and blood at the root. A black body swinging in the sin-filled breeze. Strange fruit hanging from the oppressor's tree. Surely, 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 surely he died on Calvary.
Luke 23:34. Then Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they are doing. And they cast lots to divide his clothing.
There is an undeniable connection between what we know and what we are held accountable for. It's hard to hold someone accountable for what they don't know. If they don't know better, how can they be expected to do better? It's why small children often respond to the question, why did you do that? With, I don't know. And why parents who scold their children remind them, you know better. It's because knowing is the platform on which accountability stands. Which brings us to our text. Forgive them, Father, for they do not know what they are doing. These words are considered to be the first recorded words in the book of Luke that are attributed to Jesus during his crucifixion. Clear and concise, these words point to the need for God's forgiveness. Forgive them, Father. And at the same time, the text calls on a dismissal of intent. They do not know what they are doing. In other words, you cannot hold them accountable because they just don't know. I've often struggled with the idea of forgiveness in general, but particularly this instance, where we find this man named Jesus, described in Revelation as having skin black like olives and hair like lamb's wool. guilty not of considering himself a child of, guilty only of considering himself a child of God. He is being lynched, beaten and abused the night before, and now they have taken him naked. His arms are stretched beyond their sockets, nails impaled to his flesh, his hands and in his feet, holding him in place on these large posts of wood, strange fruit indeed. He looks out and he sees this mass of people, a combination of the heinous, those who want him dead, the heartless, those who made no effort to save him, and the healed, those he'd helped in his ministry. It is an inhumane spectacle, to be clear, a hybrid of capital punishment and a hate crime, not led by ordinary people, but led by the scribes, by the priests, by the chief elders, those who really did know better, those who should have been held accountable. And yet the first words we hear from him are, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." I've heard this sermon preached so many times in the course of my life, where the message from the cross is that of forgiveness, that even facing death, Jesus forgave. He forgives those who persecute him, and he forgives the man being crucified beside him. It is an expression of unbelievable and immeasurable mercy and grace, that in the midst of this agony, Jesus doesn't demand justice, doesn't demand mercy for himself, but petitions God for the forgiveness on behalf of those who are literally killing him. At best, when we romanticize this horrifying scene, we can be enamored with this kind of selfless, it's self-sacrificing, unconditional love, willing to die to save both the innocent and the guilty, willing to die to save us all. This is the easy version. This is the kind of focus that looks at forgiveness. But I want to challenge us a little tonight to wrestle with this familiar crucifixion story presented in Luke, to imagine for a second that this passage has to do with power as much as it does forgiveness, to pay more attention to the brackets around the text than the phrase itself, and what it means that these brackets are there. These words found in brackets or labeled with footnotes in most translations are presented in this way because it is believed by historians that these are not even Jesus's words at all, that he never said this from the cross, but rather these words are those of James, his brother, added to the text much later. No one is exactly sure why they were inserted there. Maybe it was a popular saying of Jesus among those who knew him best, placed there in a way to honor him. Maybe it was added because people thought it would sound good coming from Jesus on the cross. Maybe it was added as a way to implore the oppressed to be unmeritoriously merciful to their oppressor, to be kind when kindness was never given to them, to forgive not only in the midst of injustice, but to forgive without demanding justice at all. We don't know why it was added later, but can you imagine what it meant for Jesus to die, promising paradise to a thief, planning for the care of his mother beyond his death, petitioning God for reprieve, and yet never saying a mumbling word to those who willfully crucified him, never offering any absolution for their cruelty or begging God's forgiveness on their behalf. For them, for a time, before the brackets were placed and those words inserted, when the story was still just a live stream, before it became a major headline, sound bites and snippets, this text offered nothing to the people who were used to having everything. No promises, no power, no privilege, nothing. And then we find this age-old practice of literary revision, Someone later claimed this text, claimed this story, modified its narrative, telling a different version, one that removed fault from the hands of the culpable and placed this young brown man between the wrath of an angry God, of a heartbroken parent watching their own creation torture their only son. They drafted this revised script with Jesus begging God to forgive the people murdering him. These scribes, these priests, these chief elders, the people who knew the law. These were the people who wrote the law. They revised the laws. They were the ones who knew better, those who had abused their power and their privilege, stalked and plotted against Jesus. And instead of holding them accountable, the writer paints them as unaware, as innocent, unknowing, having had a bad day, unable to handle accountability. They know not what they do. Likewise, we have taken up this mantle of denial, those of us who know the truth. Today's scribes and priests and scholars and leaders and teachers and reporters and activists and champions, those who know the truth, have taken on this banner of denial, dismissing what we know. Perhaps the greatest tragedy of these events is our annual retelling of them each year, when we who know what the brackets mean start the occasion by ignoring them, talking about forgiveness without demanding justice, preaching about God's power without teaching about the dangers of unchecked political power, never making mention that it is quite possible that Jesus never said these words from the cross at all. For those of you who know me, you know that I have a nephew. He is my sidekick. He is my heart. Jabari. Today is his 17th birthday. And I have loved being a part of his life, being entrusted with the stewardship of his development. No, he's not my biological kid, but I raise him like he's my own. I celebrate his victories like I imagine a parent would. I worry about him the way I know parents do. I think about him, this Black boy, skin smooth and radiant, black like olives, his hair like lamb's wool. I think about him, and I've watched him turn from an innocent child, and I've seen how the world has looked at him as he has grown into a young man. And I am fearful that the world has yet to learn how to treat little Black boys who grow into Black men, skin colored like black olives and hair woolen like lamb's wool. I fear that a narrative will be reclaimed and told about him, never capturing how compassionate and loving he is, what a deep thinker and how creative he is, how brilliant and how beautiful. Instead, it may be written one day that those who sought to stalk and hunt him were the innocent. Forgive us, Father, for we know not what we are doing.
Luke 23:43. He replied, "Truly, I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." will be with me in paradise. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing beside her, he said to his mother, "Woman, here is your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Here is your mother." And from that hour the disciple took her into his own home.
A premature relationship. Reflecting on these words that I've heard every year as a child, each year the 7 last words of Jesus seem different but still the same. I feel these same interpretations of these words allow us sometimes to forget the impact and the depth of the words we speak. Hearing the word pandemic has now become a key phrase, a common understanding. But let's not forget the depth of that which we have been through, that which our minds, our bodies, and souls have experienced. When we have travailed through multiple pandemics of health violence, political violence, social violence, and have seen countless bodies die at their own crosses, the cross and the lynching tree, the cross and the street corner, the cross and the jogging trail, the cross and the AME church, the cross and the nightclub, the cross and the knee on their neck, the cross and the Skittles in their pocket, the cross and the bullets ringing in their sleep, and even today, for the second time in 2021, the cross and the US Capitol attack. It makes me question the true meaning of sacrifice. The lessons one can learn when they hang on the tree and consider someone else's life before themselves. Woman, behold your son. Son, behold your mother. It's a premature relationship. One that was birthed out of need and necessity. A premature relationship, meaning one that was birthed before its proper time. Premature babies often come into the earth before their proper time. Premature babies can cause the worlds of others to be turned upside down. You weren't supposed to be here this early, they say. You were unexpected, they called out. Your life changed my life forever, they exclaimed. This is what we have often heard with premature relationships. And in that same breath, we must acknowledge the dangers that come with premature relationships. The fact that if a premature baby's heart, lungs, or brain are not fully developed, they then are placed in an incubator, a space where they are separate from the world, looking out at the world as the world is looking back at them, with communities sitting at the baby's feet, praying for their safety, their growth, and their health and well-being. Well, from the beginning, Jesus's premature relationship with his mother Mary showed us the level of intimacy that comes with an unexpected blessing or birth. Having been hidden from the world due to the shame she thought she would face being a teenage mother, Mary had to adapt to this premature relationship. Together, Mary and Jesus learned to trust each other. They learned to love each other. They learned what was working in their relationship and what was not. Mary even felt as the world continued to take her son across the nations, preaching and teaching and serving, she felt the disconnect. She felt the worry as he was hanging out in the temple when fear came over her heart. This premature relationship took over Mary's life in a way that she had never expected. So now, being at the foot of the cross as her son hangs before the world, looking out at the world as the world looks back at him, as the world makes fun of her son, calls him out of his name, spits on him, lies on him, denies him, this premature baby, Jesus Christ, looks out for his mother. Realizing that before he completes his very mission on this earth, provision must be made. For this word to be in care for someone else other than himself was the very sacrifice of the premature relationship. And now, standing at the cross, Jesus calls his disciple John, the one who baptized him, to now enter a new premature relationship. Yes, John may have walked with Jesus, talked with Jesus, ate with Jesus, but the reality is John could never be Jesus. John could never have what Jesus had until now. Until Jesus thought of the one who would carry out his legacy, care for his mother, but also know that Mary still needed to care for someone else in the process to now call her own son. Woman, behold your son. Son, behold your mother. And from this point, John took Mary into his own home, own world, own life, own decisions, own future, and own premature relationship. So prematurely, these two individuals were placed together during a time where Jesus could have been concerned about his own pain and agony of letting go of the memories he shared with his mother, letting go of the stories that he shared with John, letting go of titles like son and leader and scholar and healer and kings of kings just to care for someone else. What a selfless act. Why even think about someone else when your story is the center of attention? Why care about someone else's life when yours is hanging by a thread? What is the importance of ensuring a life policy for both Mary and John when there may have not ever been one taken out for your own life? Where does the heart of sacrifice even come from? At the core, it was love. Jesus loved this whole world that Jesus gave his very last. Jesus gave to the orphans. Jesus gave to the sinners. Jesus gave to the hungry. Jesus gave to those who thought they knew it all, but still needed to learn something new. Jesus gave to those who doubted his power. Jesus gave from a place of love and created multiple premature relationships. Never wasting time. Never taking an opportunity for granted. This created being came down to earth, lived, served, and now hangs on the cross and offers love to his mother and his beloved disciple who he trusted would carry out the care. Although Jesus created this premature relationship before its proper time, Jesus broke time. Jesus stopped time. Jesus changed time to show he cared. Jesus cares for our mothers. Jesus cares for our sons. He cares for those who have to suffer. He cares for those who need care. He cares for those who need to be in relationships. He cares. He cared and always will care. Thank God for this premature relationship that became a witness to people even in 2021 of what ultimate love looks like. Still hanging and still caring. Still bleeding and still caring. Still experiencing grief and loss and still caring. What a sacrifice that changed this woman forever. What a sacrifice that changed this son forever. And what a sacrifice that changed our lives forever. Amen.
Matthew 27:46. And about 3 o'clock, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani. That is, my God, why have you forsaken me?
I apologize. We are having some technical difficulties with my video, so I'm going to go ahead and do it live with you. So please bear with me. My God, why have you forsaken me? Jesus cried out from the cross, saying the words that we felt at one time or another. You know those times, the times that we Christians don't want to tell anyone about, because it sounds like we've lost our faith. You know, I'm talking about those times you can't see God, you can't hear him, and you can't feel him. What do when it seems as if God has abandoned God? Have you ever cried out to God and only experienced silence? If so, then you felt forsaken. Have you ever called Jesus on the main line to tell him what you want and there was no answer? If so, then you felt forsaken. Have you ever praised God in the midst of your storm, but instead of a blessing coming down, your house was repossessed? If so, then you felt forsaken. Have you ever loudly proclaimed that God is good all the time, and all the time, God is good, only for your marriage to fall apart? If so, then you felt forsaken. You see, Jesus's words were a cry of abandonment, a cry of desolation. Jesus's words were a lament, and they were Psalms 22, which is a Psalms of lament. But you know, we don't lament much anymore. When we have these experiences in life, we're taught to just get over it, to keep it moving. You know, people place a time limit on our pain. But see, what Jesus knew was that lament is the means that God has given to us so that we can maintain and deepen our relationship with him when our experience doesn't match our beliefs. That cry of lament from the cross that was in the mouth of Jesus as he hung there. Jesus used lament as the language of suffering. And by doing so, he granted it both validity and dignity. Jesus's cry on the cross is actually a declaration of the coming of God's kingdom, because the lament recognizes that things are not as they should be. It voices it in protest, and thereby it helps to bring God's kingdom to earth. We gather at a time of mourning the loss of over 550,000 Americans to COVID-19. A disproportionate number of these people are people of color. We cry out now for the vestiges of COVID-19 and remember the innocent African Americans who hung on their own lynching tree. We cry for those whose lives have been taken because of hatred and racism. And we lament, for this is not as things should be. We cry out for the hungry and the homeless, for the sick and the dying, for the grieving and the lost, the poor and the working poor, for those who struggle to breathe, whether it's due to COVID or due to the cancer of police brutality. And we lament for these things are not as they should be. We cry out for the sins of those who are like the thief on the left, who was unable or unwilling to name their sin. What sin, you may ask? The sins of payday loans, the sins of marketing alcohol in the underprivileged neighborhoods, the sin of sending poor quality food to those poor neighborhoods, the sin that it is cheaper to buy a burger and fries than it is to purchase a salad. We lament for this is not as things should be. We lament and we voice them in protest to help bring God's kingdom to earth. The songwriter asked, must Jesus bear the cross alone and all the world go free? No, there's a cross for everyone. And when we took up our cross and followed Jesus, it came with some benefits. The benefit is that God always keeps his word, and he promised to never leave or forsake us. But Jesus in his humanity expressed his feelings of abandonment. But the reality is that feelings and reality are not always the same thing. When my son was a toddler, after he took a nap, I would hear him playing, and then eventually he would cry out to let me know that he was ready to get out of his crib. So one day I heard him playing, and I walked and stood in the hallway and just watched him. And he did his usual thing, and he cried out. And I didn't immediately respond. So his cries got louder and louder and louder. He was crying out because he felt abandoned. But see, what he didn't know is that I was standing right there, only a few steps from him. So sometimes when we feel forsaken, God has not left us. He is still right there with us. And just as God was with Jesus when he was on his cross feeling forsaken, when we carry our crosses, then God is keeping his word to me as well. And you may wonder, how is it that I can claim to believe that God was still there with Jesus when he was feeling forsaken? But later you'll hear that the last words from the cross were, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. See, God was with Jesus, and he's with us. When we can't see him, when we can't feel him, when we can't hear from him, and when we see not even any trace of him. Jesus's cry of lament didn't end with that. And Jesus's story didn't end with this cry either. Because see, you see, Psalms of laments always end with hope. And so did Psalms 22. They bring about hope. Hope. And so we need to retrieve the language of lament if we hope to find the language of hope. And I pray that we will find hope in this time in which we live. Hope for justice for those who suffered at the hands of systemic abusers. Hope for those who've been told that they aren't welcome in our churches. Hope for those unjustly imprisoned. Hope for the immigrants who are separated from their loved ones. Hope for whatever it is that you are going through. Hope for those who are filled with hate and the sin of racism. Hope from Jesus's cry on the cross. We learn that God will never leave us or forsake us. From Jesus's lament, we learn that we are to speak truth to power. And the greater lesson that we learn is that God is always God, always present with us. For the word tells us that if I ascend to heaven, God, my God, is there. And if I make my bed in Sheol, God, my God, is there. My God is with me. My God was with Jesus, and my God is with you. Amen.
John 19:28. After this, when Jesus knew all was now finished, he said, in order to fulfill the scripture, I am thirsty.
I thirst. Dry mouth, dying, gasping. I thirst. I have thirst, speaks the purveyor of life. Dry mouth, gasping. Have you felt the desperation of thirst? My mouth went dry the closest I came to death. My mouth went dry, dying. Dry mouth, gasping. I observed inwardly, is this what all those narrators were trying to explain all those years to thirst? The mouth goes dry. I used to think these words explained the condition of Jesus's body, crumpled and dying on the cross, dry and desperate as a person nearing death. His body, of course, he's dehydrated, made to carry the instrument of his own torture up a hill, whipped, didn't have time for a deep drag or a sip. Amid the fury and rage of the crowd. But maybe he's simply desperate and coming close to death, to thirst. The mouth goes dry, dry. No living water. Nearby, just the desperate throat crack, aching, physically unable to swallow. They say side effects from the COVID-19 vaccine are exponentially worse on a body that is not adequately hydrated. Not adequately hydrated. Not held in belonging, not fitting, not in the mold. Not offered living waters, not by the Son of Man, but not offered living waters by the gatekeepers of the message of love, the ones who called those gates closed, when the purveyor of life, the Son of God, called them open. We continue to thirst, and if you too feel that thirst for righteousness, thirst for equity, thirst for transformation, a thirst that cannot be quelled by the bitter vinegar wine, the bitter vinegar wine of more of the same, a thirst of those living on the edge of chaos. Know that we too approach death, not with fear. We who have not been hydrated by the status quo, we who seek equity of everlasting water embedded in the constellations of care, equality, belonging, until this thirst is quenched. Continue to create, continue to stave off the death toll, to continue to nourish ourselves in the creative, create to keep from dying, create to make hope possible, create, swallow. Take a deep drag of your own imagination to embed the seeds of our future in the soil, soaked in blood, that we may never thirst again.
John 19:30. When Jesus had received the wine, he said, "It is finished." Then he bowed his head and gave up his spirit.
I came down from hell. I left my my throne, I saw that there was a need to make you my own. I bear your burdens and your sins too. I bear them all to the cross. But you rejected me as I died for you. My love is everlasting. Did you know it's so true? Yet you hung me high and you stretched me wide. I hung my head for you. I said, it is finished. It's done. Prophecy fulfilled. Because I love you. It is finished. It's done. Prophecy fulfilled. Because I love you. With every stripe, they delivered your heart. With every bruise that I felt your heart. And every sin that you say or think, they are nailed to the cross and covered by my blood. It is finished. It's done. Prophecy fulfilled. Yes, it is. No greater love. It is finished. It's done. Oh, prophecy fulfilled. No greater love. When they put those nails in my hand, it's done. I thought about the love I had for you. No greater love to die for love. When they pushed those crowns of thorns in my head, it's done. I thought about you. No greater love to die for love. When they nailed my feet, it's done. I thought about the purpose that you must walk in. You must walk in your purpose. No greater love to die for love. It is finished. It's done. Because I love you. Yeah. I'm standing here, arms open wide, just waiting for you to run inside. Let me love you. Wow. I bring you the last word from Luke, chapter 23, verse 46. Then Jesus, crying with a loud voice, said, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. Having said this, he breathed his last.
All state insurance agency slogan is "You're in good hands." When it comes to car insurance, you are in good hands. Yet there are specific hands that Jesus only touched with his spirit, even when he was hanging on the cross. He believes that he is in good hands. And so, with a loud voice, he cries, "Father, into your hands I commit, and trust you with my spirit." Jesus once again draws from his tradition, the Psalms. Psalm 31 and 5 says this line, "Into your hands I commit my spirit." This psalm seems out of place. Now I understand why he would quote Psalm 22. My God, why have you forsaken me?" That's a good psalm to quote in this situation. However, this is the opening line of Psalm 31. "In you, Lord, I seek refuge. Do not let me be put to shame. In you, Lord, I seek refuge, and do not let me be put to shame." Jesus is naked on a cross, dying by the stake in the most humiliating way. Where is God's refuge? The entirety of the psalm does not seem to fit the situation. Nevertheless, Jesus did not quote the whole psalm. And the part he chooses, he adds the word "Father." "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." He improvises and uses the language for God nearest to him, and the language for God he needs for that moment. Feel free to do the same and use the language for God that is near to your heart in distress. He said with a loud voice, and he breathed his last. This tells me three things. Now, I am a Black Baptist preacher, so there are three things. Here they are. God is with you always. Crosses don't change that. Number two, evil is real. Number three, God is in control, and therefore evil never wins, even on Good Friday. There is an intimacy with Jesus and God, the Father, that does not change. At his most shameful moment, Jesus feels the need to call God Father, and he entrusts his spirit into the hands of his Father. Jesus looks powerless. The state is executing him in the most shameful way possible. His body is not in his control, but that is all that they can do to him now. His spirit belongs to God. He was God even on the cross. He belonged to God even on the cross. Perhaps he added Father to this line of a hymn to remind himself that he was not alone, and God cared for him and cared about the injustice that God sees. So much so that the text says that God cared for God's Son, so much so that God starts a riot. Yes, God starts a riot and destroys property in the temple. Read the text. There's an earthquake and God rips the veil in the temple from top to bottom and forbids the sun to shine in the middle of the day. God is not a dispassionate bystander to evil. God is not a dispassionate bystander to evil. Number two, evil is real. God can be with you, and you can be impacted by the evil of the world. You may not always be rescued from evil. Evil hands from the Roman Empire and those in bed with it caused Jesus' death. Jesus' body has been in some evil hands. Evil hands arrested Jesus. Evil hands marched him to judgment hall. Evil hands fought him. Evil hands seized Simon the Cyrene, a black man, and forced him to help Jesus carry the cross. Evil hands are the colonizing hands of the Roman Empire. Evil hands nailed his hands and feet. Evil hands build a cultural state. Evil hands build a system where crucifixion is something you do to human beings. Evil hands are in government. Evil hands are invested in the death penalty. Evil hands sign bills that restrict who can access the polls and make it illegal to give someone a snack and water while waiting in line to vote. Evil hands sanction the arrest of a black woman, calling for accountability, while other evil hands sign oppression law. Evil hands intentionally drive into barricades and kill people just because the person they voted for lost. Just today, evil hands kill Jesus, and evil hands kill us daily. Evil hands touch his body, and if we are not careful, our hands have the ability to do evil. We are not exempt. You can wash evil hands as a pilot, and they're still evil. Jesus' body has been handled by evil hands. Evil hands believe that they are ultimate and in control. Yes, Jesus has literally been in some evil hands. His body has been in some evil hands. But I'm so glad that evil hands are not the only hands. Evil hands are not ultimate hands. Evil does not have ultimate authority. Now, I am not rushing to Sunday. I am still right here in Good Friday. In Luke's telling, there was no fear in Jesus' side. And if you read in the Gospel of John, it was customary for a Roman soldier to break the bones of the one being crucified to expedite the death. None of that happens in Luke. All the text says, he cried out with a loud voice, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. The very thing that animates him is being placed into God's hands. The state cannot control it, even as they are killing him. His spirit belongs to God. God, and God alone, is in control of life and death. His spirit is not the property of the state. Jesus, breathing his last, shows the world that the power of this world are not God and do not have ultimate authority. God will do what God will do with anything you put in God's hand. Even when governments think their hand is final and supreme, they are not. The Black Methodist hymn writer wrote this hymn, harder yet, make thee the fight. Right might often yield to might, this is charge arbitrarily. Wickedness around may reign, and Satan's cause may seem to gain. But there is a God who rules above with hands of power, and a heart of love. If I am right, he'll fight my battle. I shall be free someday. I'm glad because evil hands may be powerful, but they are oftentimes loveless. Charles Tilley said, God's hands are hands of power, and God also has a heart of love. God's hands have been known to lead people out of the bondage of Egypt. My ancestors, while experiencing the hands of overseers with whips in them, said he's got the whole world in his hands. God's hands are good hands to be in. God's hands are just hands. God's hands are righteous hands. The late Bishop Charles G. Hayes and the Cosmopolitan Choir in Chicago said, put all of our burdens, problems, and unanswered questions in his hand. Problems, burdens, and unanswered questions in his hand. Well, Good Friday is one big unanswered question, but it's in God's hands. Then he breathed his last. Jesus was in charge until the end. Evil hands do not have the last word, even on Friday, because it is left in God's loving hands. And that's what makes this a Good Friday. Amen.
Amen. We thank God for those words, those powerful words. Go ahead and put your comments in the chat, all of it. Thank you to all of our speakers. And at this time, as a way of reflection, we would love to engage you all. We would love to engage those who are on Facebook and all across the world. Here's the question to think about. What is one thing you are taking from today? What is one thing that you are taking with you? One lesson that you're taking with you today? Go ahead and drop it in the chat. As we are doing that, I'm going to state one thing that I'm taking away. One thing I'm taking away is that creativity is amazing, that God is amazing, and God has given us the gift to be creative. All of the different speakers were amazing, amazing, amazing today. So now we're asking for you to reflect. What is one thing that you're taking away? One lesson that you're going to gather with you? Go ahead and drop it into the comments. Someone says that creativity is amazing. Creativity is amazing. Continue to flood, continue to flood. God is in control. Remember that God is in control. Someone else is saying amen. Amen. God is in control. The extraordinarily complicated nature of forgiveness. I'm taking away the extraordinary complicated nature of forgiveness. Continue to flood them. Continue to flood them in. God is in control. Creativity is amazing. The extraordinary, all in God's hands. All in God's hands. And so we thank you for taking time to reflect and remembering that everything is left in God's hands. That's what makes this a Good Friday. Wonderful gifts from God have been shared with us. There are unanswered questions still in his hands. God is always with us, even when the evil hands think they are. Evil doesn't have the ultimate authority. Also, I've never experienced a visual sermon. I did today, and I loved it. And we end with creativity is spirit. Creativity is spirit. May God bless you all.
Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Ooh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they pierced him in the side? Were you there when they pierced him in the side? Ooh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they pierced him in the side? Were you there when they laid him in the tomb? Were you there when they laid him in the tomb? Ooh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they laid him in the tomb? We were there when they crucified